this evening. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project film and talk. I wanted to give the library a brief plug. We're celebrating 100 years this year in 2021 of library for Anne Arundel County, and we want to hear your library story if you'd like to share it. If you would, you could share it with us at www.aacpl.net/100years. Thank you for joining us for this important conversation about the history of lynching in Maryland and how that atrocity is being addressed today. There will be a short film followed by a talk. Please feel free to ask questions via chat. I will relay those questions to our presenters. This evening, Michelle McConville is a host and tech host. She will be taking care of technical aspects of the program and Zoom throughout the evening. You can also address questions to her as well. Let us welcome Will Schwartz and Monica Lindsay. Will is an independent TV producer and the founder and president of the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project. And Monica Lindsay is co-chair of Connecting the Dots and a Maryland Lynching Memorial Project board member. Thank you, folks. I'm going to turn off my video at this point in time, but I will still be available, okay?
Is this my turn? Am I supposed to go into it right now? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yes, it is your turn.
I've already screwed it up, you see. And this is just, first of all, thank you for having me and welcome everyone. And I really appreciate your coming out to, address what is a very, very difficult subject. I'll start by telling you that 5 years ago, I never would have imagined that I would be here talking to you about this. I like to describe myself sometimes as an accidental activist. I just kind of fell into this. What really, the way it started was I went to see Brian Stevenson talk when he was on his book tour for Just Mercy. I hadn't even heard of him. This was probably about 5 years ago. The book was just out. He was speaking at the Pratt Library in Baltimore, and I read his book before we went, and I was blown away. First of all, the book, if you haven't read it yet, Just Mercy it's a life-altering book. It's spectacular, and I couldn't recommend it more highly. But in this course of giving his book talk that night, and it was the one that he gives all the time, he mentioned that EJI, the Equal Justice Initiative, the civil rights legal organization that he founded in 1989, they had just finished a report, their first report on lynching in America. I think it's on its third iteration now, but it had just been completed then. And in the course of discussing the book and discussing that work on the lynching research, he said that he revealed that there had been, at that point, they had documented over 4,500 racial terror lynchings in this country between the end of the Civil War, I think, and the beginning of World War II, or the end of World War II. And I have to say that I was stunned. I mean, I had absolutely no idea of that these things happened, especially, at such scale, and also of the depravity of these crimes. They were hideous. These were grotesque, sadistic displays. They were public spectacles, and intentionally so. They were the murders were committed to intimidate Black populations and really to assert and enforce white supremacy. And this, I don't think I'm that different in that I was really unaware for the most part of how widespread this issue was. And I think that's because this history has been, ignored and minimized and marginalized, and if not just outright denied for generations. And so that's really when I became interested and aware of this issue. And I'm going to start sharing my screen now. So I apologize for any, whoops. I think I'm going to need to get some help with that. Michelle says I'm disabled.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Did you see also the comment in the chat asking you to speak up a little bit?
I will. No, I didn't, but thank you. I will.
Okay, and
My mother channeling, whoever that is. That was a constant thing from her.
there you are. Now try.
Okay. Here we go. So, this was kind of the beginning of the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project. We are a 501c3, and we work to advance the cause of reconciliation in the state by documenting the history of racial terror lynchings. We advocate for public acknowledgement of these crimes, and we work hopefully to honor and dignify the lives of the victims. And the premise that we start with is that we know from the EJI's work that there were more than 6,500 Black Americans who were lynched in the United States between 1865 and 1950. And you might have heard me say 4,500 before, and I did, because at the time that I heard Brian that night, that's what the count was. This past year, EJI did another report on Reconstruction, and they were able to discover that an additional 2,000 lynchings at least. We also know that at least 38 were in the state of Maryland, and that also is a number that kind of can change. When we started out, we thought there were at least 40. At one point, we had we're up to 41, and but as we learn more, we learned that one lynching we discovered that we thought was in Rosedale and Baltimore County actually happened in Rosendale in Missouri. So it's kind of a fluctuating thing. And I like to put, these are the names of the victims. So, and I like to leave this up just for a little bit, because I think all of these men, and actually there's 2 children among them as well, deserve that recognition. I think it's important to have these names register. As you can see, these are the 38, and they took place over a period of 80 years, but you can see that 70% of them actually happened in the span of just 30 years. That pattern actually mirrors what we see in the country generally. It's not unusual. Right after the Civil War, after a Reconstruction, when slavery was no longer permitted, that was when the lynchings mostly started. Although they did happen before that. As you can see, the first lynching in Maryland was in 1854. I'll talk about that in a second. Here's where they occurred in Maryland, and you can see that these are the counties. There are, I want to say, 17 counties where lynchings occurred. Anne Arundel County actually had the most, with 5, and then you can see the distribution of these of other counties, of numbers of lynchings in these other counties. So I want to talk to you first about a little bit about the very first lynching, because we actually know some things about that, and it's interesting in that it kind of is a template for what happened afterwards. There was a gentleman by the name of Dave Thomas. He was a laborer in Caroline County in Denton, I believe. He was 34 years old. He had a wife and 3 children. Interestingly, he was a free Black man. Baltimore at the time actually had the largest free Black population in the United States. This was before the Civil War. In any case, he was accused of killing a white man by the name of William Butler. They knew each other apparently, although the relationship is unclear. Thomas arrived at Butler's house on the evening of September 27th in 1854. The 2 men took a walk together, and they had some disagreement apparently over the course of that walk. And Thomas reportedly hit him over the head, hit Mr. Butler over the head with a musket, caused fatal injuries. And he was reported to have made a confession in which he said he didn't mean to strike him that hard. He was tried for murder on October 5th, and actually what you're looking at is a portion of the minutes of the trial proceedings. I don't know how well you can see it, but you can see that Thomas called, these were 4 witnesses. The state called 4 witnesses. Thomas only called 1. He was found guilty of second-degree manslaughter, and I'm seeing where it is. It's somewhere over here. And he was sentenced to 16 years and 7 months in the state penitentiary. And that did not satisfy the people of Denton. And that very day, they gathered at the jail and in anger, and they tried to pull him out. They tried to get the jailer to let him go, and they were unsuccessful. But 2 days later, they were able to do that. And on Saturday, October 7th, they tied the sheriff up, apparently, to get at Thomas, and they hanged him right there from a plank that they had nailed to the jailhouse. And here's actually some accounts that in the press of the day. The left on the article is from the Sun, and the Sun refers to the attempt on the first time to get him, and they said that says the vengeance of the population was only temporarily stayed. And then there's a different paper, Eastern Shore paper, that on the right. Michael Pfeiffer, who is a historian of these crimes, he did some research on these lynchings that happened before this, before the Civil War, and he was able to document actually 55 that occurred. And of the 55, Thomas was one of only 3 Blacks who were lynched. And the we have to remember what was going on at this time. This was right before the Civil War. I think the writing was kind of on the wall already about what was going to happen with slavery. It had been abolished in France in 1794. In 1807, England banned the slave trade, and then they banned the practice altogether in 1833. And we knew which way the country was headed, and Southern whites especially rallied to defend slavery. And then these lynchings started occurring with more frequency, and they really are a template for what happened post-emancipation. They were done to enforce white supremacy and control the Black population as slavery became no longer a tool. And then, obviously this was independent of the law as well. So that was the first lynching that we know of in Maryland. And I want to show you a short film now about the very last one that we know of, which was the lynching of George Armwood and Princess Anne in 1933. So I hope, if you don't hear the sound when it comes up, let me know. And so something happened here. I apologize. So I'm having a buffering problem here. Give me a moment and I'll try and get this back.
Is it your internet connection, or is it something that if you sent it to someone, they could?
Uh, Let me see if I can get it on YouTube. I'm sorry about this.
They beat him.
Are you seeing this now or no? Not yet, right?
I am not seeing anything yet.
Okay.
They beat him and they stabbed him and they hung him and they set him on fire.
They knew in advance what was going to happen.
Their decision to take him away from the safety of Baltimore City was a tragic mistake.
They didn't think a black man's life was worth anything.
Like the rest of the country, the 1930s were a difficult time in Maryland.
With the Depression, families, and it didn't matter whether they were black or white, most people were in dire economic straits.
And in the 30s, the Eastern Shore was predominantly agricultural and absolutely segregated. Jim Crow was alive and well in the 30s on the shore.
The threat to blacks on the shore was magnified by anger over the case of Ewell Lee, a black man also known as Orphan Jones. In January of 1932, Lee was convicted of murdering a white family of 4 in Berlin. Lee's lawyer was Bernard Adis, a communist from Baltimore. He not only got Lee's original conviction reversed, but managed to drag the case on for years, infuriating whites.
He was despised on the lower shore, even though he was a tremendously effective defense attorney for his client.
In October of 1933, the Lee case was still unresolved when an elderly woman named Mary Denston said she was attacked by a black man while walking home near Princess Anne. She said she didn't know her assailant, but would be able to identify him among 1,000. Word of the attack spread quickly. Soon, hundreds of men from 3 counties joined the manhunt. The man they were hunting was George Armwood, a 22-year-old farm worker who lived near Pocomoke City.
My grandmother's name is Mary Armwood. You know, it was her family, it was her relative, and she was there.
Tina's grandmother had fond memories of her cousin.
He would come by a lot, and he seemed like a really nice guy. He was always smiling, he was very friendly, and she said he used to whistle a lot.
When he was 15, George left school to live and work with a white man on a nearby farm. Armwood, the Afro learned, was reared by a white family and recognized by many to be feeble-minded and a fit subject for a psychopathic ward. He was not put in one because, in spite of his mental infirmity, or because of it, he was a good workman and an inexpensive one. Even before Mrs. Denston had a chance to identify him, Armwood was named as her attacker. It's not clear why.
I'm not sure that Armwood committed a crime at all. From what we know, and the fact that he was described as being dim-witted, I'm not sure if he committed a crime. When you're looking for someone to blame for something, you find a scapegoat. The weakest victim, the weakest person you can find, and you choose that person.
Whatever the reason, Armwood was a wanted man. The search intensified, and the next day, an armed posse entered the Armwood home, demanding to know where George was.
And then they started threatening them, telling them that if, they didn't give him up and if they knew where he was, that they would hurt all of them. Eventually, they seen him being drugged out of the woods. And she said that they pulled him out and they were beating on him, and then they tied him to the back of a car and made him walk.
In a time of anxiety and anger, Armwood's capture was like lighting a fuse.
The Yulee case was still very much in the headlines, but here comes George Armwood, another African American accused of a crime against a white woman.
They had just lynched Matt Williams 2 years prior to. And then also the people in Worcester County were still in uproar because what happened to Orr Lee, called Orphan Jones, because it took 2 years before he was brought to justice, and they wanted it to happen immediately.
Armwood was first taken to the Princess Anne jail, but fearing trouble, police took him to the Wicomico jail in Salisbury, the very place where Matthew Williams was lynched not 2 years earlier. As news of Armwood's capture spread, angry crowds began to gather. It was clear he wasn't safe in Salisbury either, so Governor Albert Ritchie ordered state police to take Armwood away from the shore altogether. Just as Armwood was let out the back door, the mob burst through the front. From Salisbury, Armwood was taken first to Cecil County and then to the Baltimore City Jail, where it was reported he signed a confession. In Baltimore, Armwood was out of the reach of shore mobs, but the respite was short-lived.
Judge Robert Dewar ordered that Armwood be returned to the Somerset County Jail after he had been assured by Sheriff Luther Daugherty and by State's Attorney John Robbins that they had everything under control. I could not understand why Judge Dewar would do such a thing because he was a circuit court judge. He wasn't a law enforcement officer. I found out later from his granddaughter that Judge Dewar was up for re-election the next fall.
Robbins told Ritchie the danger of violence had passed. He said Somerset County is law-abiding and peaceful. Judge Dewar also assured the governor, but he may have been more concerned with assuring his constituents.
Judge Dewar realized that if he didn't bring Armwood back, it would be considered a repudiation of his own community. So to his shame, he had him come back.
Ritchie also faced re-election, so he agreed, and at 10 o'clock that night, a convoy of state police left Baltimore with Armwood in tow. When the sun came up on October 18th, George Armwood was sitting in a cell at the Princess Anne jail. Everyone on the shore knew it. His return was trumpeted in the papers and on the radio. Predictably, the jail attracted the curious and the furious. People arrived by the hundreds. The danger was clear and growing. The troopers who brought Armwood back stayed to guard the jail, but there were only 25, and the mob now numbered in the thousands. The American Legion refused to provide reinforcements, and Robbins refused to allow Armwood to be returned to Baltimore. Reports of unrest soon reached the governor. Again, Ritchie called Robbins and Dewar, and again, each man assured him that Armwood was safe. But with every minute, the mob was getting larger and more menacing. At 7 o'clock, Dewar went to the jail himself to talk to the angry crowd.
The judge confronted the mob and said, I know all of you, I know most of you. Now, let's just go home. We're going to try and let the law take its course.
And there were shouts from the mob, well, what if ATIS comes over? There was this prevailing attitude in the lower shore that if something was not done quickly, this lawyer ATIS will do the same thing here that he did in Worcester County, and we're not going to have that.
After speaking to the mob, Dewar got back in his car and left for dinner, thinking the crisis was over. He was mistaken. No sooner had the judge left when the crowd advanced at the badly outnumbered troopers. As they surged forward, the police closed ranks at the jail entrance. Rocks and bricks started flying. The police answered with tear gas. The smoke had the desired effect, but was quickly dispersed by the wind, and the crowd, still growing in number and frenzy, pressed in. The police were armed but never fired a shot. Instead, there was hand-to-hand combat at the entrance. Some men brought heavy rails and rammed the gate repeatedly until it finally gave way at 8:30. A howl arose from the mob when the gate went down. Armwood was found hiding under the mattress in his cell on the second floor. He was dragged outside, a noose already around his neck. The frenzied mob taunted and beat the helpless prisoner. A boy of 18 cut Armwood's ear off and waved it around. It was described as a bloody carnival in which men, women, and even children took part.
Yes, it was a family affair. It wasn't just men, but it was women. And they knew in advance what was going to happen.
To show their contempt for Dewar, they dragged Armwood behind the truck to the judge's home, hoping to hang him there. One estimate put the size of the mob at 5,000 people, almost 6 times the population of Princess Anne itself. Finding no suitable tree at Judge Dewar's home, they chose a tall oak nearby. The mob shrieked as they yanked Armwood up and let him drop several times. Then they let him hang for 5 minutes. When they cut him down, Armwood was dead, but the spectacle wasn't over.
And they drug his body around for everyone to see. And then she says, I remember, them dragging his body through the neighborhood and, and everyone in the house, of course, crying and being really upset.
Finally, Armwood's body was dragged to the courthouse. It was doused with gasoline and set afire. The crowd was so deep, the police couldn't get through. A visitor described the stench of burning flesh and a mob of men, women, boys, and girls dancing and singing around the burning body as if in celebration. The rope was cut into small pieces and given away as souvenirs. Armwood's charred body was finally dumped in front of a lumberyard where it lay in the street for hours. It became an iconic image memorialized on the front page of the Afro-American newspapers. A young reporter named Clarence Mitchell Jr. was sent to the scene.
When we got down there, the crowd was there. They had actually completed the lynching at the time, but the body was...
They shoot him or hang him?
They hanged and then poured gasoline on the body and set it on fire. And it was right out there in the middle of the street.
How'd you feel, though, when you saw this?
Well, it was a revolting sight. There's no doubt about that. I see a fellow human lying there in the middle of the street in that kind of a condition.
Here's how Mitchell described the scene in print.
The skin of George Armwood was scorched and blackened, while his face had suffered many blows from sharp and heavy instruments. A cursory glance revealed that one ear was missing, and his tongue between his clenched teeth gave evidence of his great agony before death. There is no adequate description of the mute evidence of gloating on the part of whites who gathered to watch the effect upon our people.
Mary Denston never did identify Armwood as her assailant, yet thousands of people took part in his murder, which was enabled by a few.
This was what Judge Dewar, he and the governor at the time were complicit in. They represented the establishment, and they didn't think a black man's life was worth anything.
For his part, Governor Ritchie responded with outrage, saying, "I am shocked beyond expression at this horrible lynching."
It's a little disingenuous of Ritchie to claim that he didn't know that there was a possibility that this would occur. Anyone with any knowledge of previous events knew that this was a great risk.
Ritchie placed responsibility for the lynching squarely on the shoulders of Judge Dewar and State's Attorney Robbins.
So there was a clear effort on the governor's part to place the blame on other men as opposed to taking that responsibility himself.
Judge Dewar admitted, "I was badly mistaken in my judgment, and I am deeply grieved that such a thing happened in our county." His remorse was met with skepticism by the Baltimore press. Robbins, on the other hand, was mum. To the many questions he faced, he had but one response: "I have no statement to make at this time." Newspapers around the country registered disbelief and disgust at the events in Maryland. It was a stain on the state and its governor. Under fire, Ritchie ordered Attorney General Lane to investigate the crime at once. 9 suspects were identified, but in Maryland at that time, charges could only be brought by the county state's attorney, and Robbins refused to arrest anyone.
So the governor actually, in effect, declared martial law, sent the Maryland militia to Salisbury, to the armory in Salisbury, where they fanned out and actually apprehended 4 alleged leaders of the lynch mob.
The locals were incensed and gathered at the armory trying to intimidate the troops and prevent the arrests. They didn't succeed. The 4 men were rushed to Baltimore and were returned to the shore to face charges.
State's Attorney Robbins said, "Judge, I don't have any evidence against these men, so I've got nothing to charge them with," whereupon the judge dismissed the case. So the Armwood lynching, just as the Matthew Williams lynching, went without anyone being charged.
Yeah, so basically nothing happened. So business as usual. But someone had lost their life. Family members lost a loved one.
And despite their efforts to placate shore voters, both Ritchie and Dewar lost their re-election bids the next year. The community continues to suffer.
President and entirety of Somerset County are still reaping the results of that incident. We have a serious racial divide that still exists in our county.
And until we get to the point of talking about it, talking about what brought it about and the aftermath of it, nothing's going to be done. There's that huge gap. There's no understanding of each other. And until we get to that point, lynching is going to have, it's like a stab in the heart.
It's still difficult to watch. You know, that happened 88 years ago, which may seem like you know, prehistoric, but it really isn't. It's not that long ago. In fact, there are still hundreds of thousands of people alive in Maryland today who were alive on the day that lynching happened, and we can't forget that. And I think I think you can draw a straight line between that lynching and those, you know, many others like it, and you know, white cops shooting black people in the back, right, or in bed, or kneeling on their neck, on their throats in broad daylight. It's all part of the same continuum, and that's why, by the way, it's so important that what Maryland is about to do with our, you know, Maryland, as you, I hope know, is the only state to have created a Truth and Reconciliation Commission specifically to deal with our history of lynching. And honestly, I am so proud of our state for doing that, I have to tell you. And the first hearings are going to happen, they're going to start on October 2nd. And one of the earlier hearings as well is going to be in Anne Arundel County, and Monica can probably tell you about that in a little bit. But I think what, you know, one of the things that ties that history together is the impunity, right, with which these murders were committed. There was an assumption of legitimacy. There was a comfort in the doing of it, an acceptance. You know, the fact that those 9 suspects, or 4 of them that were, almost arraigned, were let go after minutes, right? They knew they were they had nothing to fear. I don't want to take too much more time because I want to make sure that Monica gets a chance to talk about what's going on in Anne Arundel County. But I do want to just show you a little bit about what's.
Before you get to that, Will, there was a question about the film, specifically about Armwood's arms looking scarred.
I don't know.
Can you speak to that?
I really can't, except to say that I just don't. It was just, there's that one picture that we really have of him. And that could be just an artifact of the age of the picture, the fact that it was blown up from a photograph that was in the newspaper. So I don't know anything about that, except that we know that he was beaten after he was captured, and that could be a result of that as well.
Thank you, Will.
Of course. So I want to just talk to you a little bit about the kinds of things that we do, our Maryland Lynching Memorial Project and our coalition partners, including those in connecting the dots in Anne Arundel County. So there are 3 basic kinds of community remembrance projects that EJI encourages communities to participate in. This soil collection, which many of you may have already been involved in. This was the soil collection we did near where I live for the lynching of Howard Cooper in 1885. And as you know, many of you may know that this soil is on display at the EJI Museum in Montgomery, and I think it's a very powerful kind of display. This is soil collected at lynching sites all over the country. And in fact, there's one that's going to be going on in Montgomery County this weekend. And if you're interested, if you go to our website, you can find information about that. And another example of a community remembrance project is the dedication of historical markers. And this is a scene from the dedication of the first historical marker, EJI historical marker, that was installed in Annapolis in September of 2019, I believe, and you may recognize that woman speaking at the podium. I like to, this is one of the most moving, remarkable days I've ever spent. I have to tell you, it was, to have that many people out there for this purpose was, it was incredible. And I like to tell people this is what social justice looks like right here. There's the original marker, which is now in front of the library. Is it in Glen Burnie?
Severna Park Library.
Sorry. And then here is a marker that was just dedicated in Towson as well. And then, so many communities, there was another marker that was just installed in Cumberland this past weekend or 2 weeks ago. And this is another thing. And there was one in Salisbury that's also been erected. So these hopefully are going to continue to happen all over the state. And then the third kind of community remembrance project involves these columns at the memorial in Montgomery. And as many of you know, these columns each represent a county where racial terror lynching occurred. They're on the underside, they're identified and the names are engraved on them. And then the other thing is that around the site, there are these a duplicate set of columns, and the idea is that at some point local counties will collect the corresponding memorial column and repatriate it in their home county and in a suitable place. So I don't want to really go on much more except to say that we do work with well, you know what, I do want to say a couple of other things. One is, I just want to briefly address why we do these things, right? It's not just about collecting the dirt or putting up a sign. there are several reasons to do this. One is to correct the record, right? We've got to change the narrative around race in this country. This history has been ignored and minimized for so long. You know, we know that the Confederate monuments had dotted the landscape for so long, unchallenged. And I hope people are aware of that the last monument to the Confederacy on public land in Maryland, in Easton, Talbot, right? The Talbot Boys statue is just ruled that they've just voted to remove that. So that's a victory for good sense as well. So, and the important thing is to tell the truth. And we hear a lot about truth and reconciliation. Well, as Brian Stevenson likes to say, truth and reconciliation are sequential, and there can be no reconciliation until we embrace the truth, until we confront it, acknowledge it, and then deal with it. So that's one reason we do this. Another reason is because we have to understand how this legacy of racism and white supremacy and lynching continues to be felt. It still is manifest in our country today. There is not only the long-term hereditary trauma, both psychic and physical, that is manifest in Black population in this country, but in other ways that are not that hard to see. Look at the COVID experience that we've had here, right? Look at the higher incidence of COVID in the Black community, the lower incidence of vaccination, the voting suppression laws that are happening now, the January 6th insurrection. That was, that is racist at its base. And that is white supremacy, right? That is white supremacy, and we need to recognize it as such. So I don't want to take any more time because I want to make sure that Monica gets a chance to tell you about connecting the dots in Anne Arundel County. I'll just tell you that we have we work with coalitions in I think 13 or 14 of the 17 counties where racial terror lynchings occurred, and Monica's coalition is one of the best by far, and it's all because of Monica, to tell you the truth. So she's a pleasure to work with.
Before we get to Monica's bit, there were a couple questions about the markers.
Okay.
One question was about, wasn't it in the news that one of the markers had recently been disfigured?
So I don't know about in Maryland. I don't.
I could probably best answer that question. Good evening, everyone. So the question about the disfigurement, the marker was not actually disfigured. There was a report that went out in the news that said that that a noose had been placed on the marker that was recently rededicated at the Severna Park Library branch. That news went out prior to the investigation being completed, and it was not what it was initially reported as. So I guess it was either someone overly enthusiastically reporting something, but there was no disfigurement. The marker is fine. The marker is still there at Severna Park Library, and it's intact.
Thank you, Monica. And I believe Will may be typing an answer to the other question about a marker. Someone feels like moving the marker from downtown Annapolis to the library location makes it much less visible. Can you explain why that was done?
So the marker was never moved. So I'm not sure where they may have gotten that information. So what happened is there's still the marker on the Calvert Street location. And the second marker is the second marker is actually the original marker. And that original marker is now at the Severna Park Library. So there are two markers in Anne Arundel County. The one on the original location that we originally dedicated in September of 2019 at the ceremony that Will, thank you for sharing that picture. It gave me really good memories. but that marker suffered an accident after it was installed in January. A bus pulled out a little bit too far. He had his mirror out too far, and he hit the marker. And the marker was intact. However, it couldn't be it couldn't be put back on the pole. So that's how we ended up with the blessing of ending up with the 2 markers. So that original marker is now in front of the Serena Park Library. And then we had a replacement marker that went at the original Calvert Street location.
Thank you, Monica.
Yes. Thank you for your question. I know people were a little bit confused, I guess, about that. So I guess I kind of just wanted to share a little bit, if it's, unless there are other questions.
There are no other questions at this point in time.
All right, great. Oops, sorry, technical difficulties here. All right, so we are connecting the dots, and we are so pleased to be the local coalition partnered with Will's fantastic organization, the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project, as well as partnered with the Equal Justice Initiative. Our Anne Arundel County branch has been focusing on a lot of things in the arena of social and racial justice. And among them is this work that we do in coordination with the community remembrance programs through the Equal Justice Initiative. So basically, our mission is to seek and spread truth through education and remembrance. We are a diverse coalition of very active community members, and we partner with a lot of local organizations to do many activities in Anne Arundel County. So, and Will kind of covered some of the activities that we're involved in, that community programming. We're the coordinating coalition with the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So we're working with them about that hearing that he mentioned earlier. And we're also working as a local community remembrance coalition with the Equal Justice Initiative, doing that marker installation, research into these stories that are that have occurred in Anne Arundel County history. We're in the midst of an oral histories project in coordination with the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project, and we are having a soil collection coming up very soon. So just to give you a general idea of some of the things we've done around the county, one of the first things we did was in coordination with Maryland Hall. We did a screening, gosh, I believe that was back in 2018, of the film 13th by Ava DuVernay. And we had panelists, Hans Charles, Suzanne Kay, and Adrian Mildrow. That was kind of our first major event, and we worked with them to bring that to the community. We did the Henry Davis lynching remembrance in December of 2018, which was our first remembrance ceremony service that we had. We also did, and you'll recognize that newspaper article, we did a screening and panel discussion of outrage. And again, that was in collaboration with Maryland Hall. Also establishing that marker, lynching memorial marker. That was our Remembrance and Reconciliation program, September 7th of 2019, when we established that first marker. We did a screening in connection with Cinemark of Just Mercy, and sold out 2 theaters of people coming to see that wonderful film based off the book that Will spoke about, that kind of inspired his journey into activism. And we recently lost this gentleman, Mr. Rembrandt. We did a screening of a documentary about his life. The film was called Ashes to Ashes. And this gentleman actually survived a lynching attempt. He passed away in April of this year. But it was a wonderful opportunity to engage in a dialogue with someone who survived a lynching attempt. And incredible to hear his perspective and how it impacted his life from that moment forward. So we were honored to have him with us and for him to speak to us about his life. And we were able to do some support to support his family following that. And then our most recent activity was the rededication of that original marker at the Severna Park Library. We did that on June 15th. So that marker is now in front of the Severna Park Library, and we had a discussion following by partners coming to the table. And we're able to enter into some robust community conversation about the issues of racial justice and racial violence. So those were some of our past events, and coming up, we're pleased to share that we will have another opportunity with the library on October 13th. We'll be presenting, Connecting the Dots will be presenting the 5 Known, which will be another virtual event, which you can sign up for, where we're going to kind of share the stories of the 5 Known in Anne Arundel County. Our marker limits us to a certain amount of words, but behind those few words that we can put on a marker, those are individuals who had lives and who weren't just a few words on a marker that tells about their endings. So we just hope to share just a little bit more of what we have found about those individuals on the marker. Currently, we were pleased to announce at the rededication, we have a scholarship essay contest going on for Anne Arundel County students in grades 9th through 12th. When we dedicated our first marker, we were able to offer scholarships, and we had wonderful essayists who had the opportunity to share parts of their essay. And we are so honored and happy that the Equal Justice Initiative has offered this opportunity again to Anne Arundel County students. And I'm hoping that the link can be shared so that certainly if you know a student in 9th through 12th grade, if you follow this link, it will take them to the essay contest information. And if they have any questions, they can always email us at ctdaaco@gmail.com. So we would be so pleased and honored if your students that you're aware of would join this essay contest, because we would love to be able to give away these funds that Equal Justice Initiative has for them. And then currently we're working on our oral stories, which are currently in progress and are being collected at this time. And finally, we are working on our King Johnson remembrance. The final date is to be announced, but I believe it's going to be like December 11th, somewhere in the second week of December timeframe. So stay tuned for more information about that. So if you're interested in more information, you can always email us at ctd@aaco@gmail.com. Again, we always need volunteers to help with our events and our mission and what we're doing. That's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Will. Is there anything else you'd like to say this evening, Will?
So the only thing else that I would like to say is I would just make a plea with everyone to pay attention to this Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I think I mentioned earlier that the first hearing is going to be October 2nd in Allegheny County. This is a unique opportunity that Maryland has created for itself. And I hope we don't let it go to waste. It's too important to have this reckoning. And this is a chance for people to become part of the solution.
Well, I want to thank you, Will. Thank you, Monica, for joining us this evening. Thank you for sharing your time with us and sharing these stories. They're things that we need to come to terms with. Oh, it looks like there may be a question or someone has their hand raised. Someone does have their hand raised. Hold on. Yes, Jennifer, if you have a question, you can certainly pop it into the chat or the Q&A. She wants to know how to access the Truth and Reconciliation hearings.
So I'm glad you asked because I forgot to mention that. So there is going to be, it will be live streamed. I don't have the link yet. I think it's going to be created actually tomorrow. But if you go to our website on the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project, it'll be posted there for sure. And actually, I'm going to send out a newsletter this weekend. And if you'd like to get on that list, please, you can just submit a request on our website. If you just Google Maryland Lynching Memorial Project, you'll find your way there. And the commission website will also have the link, I'm sure. So either one of those places, you'll be able to get it. But and we will be live streaming it on our channels as well.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Jennifer, for asking that question. I want to not only thank our presenters and Michelle for being our tech host, but I also want to thank all of our attendees for coming and for the thoughtful questions that they have shared. I'm going to drop a program feedback form into the chat. If you would like to tell us what you thought of the program, please share. And again, thank you all for joining us this evening.
Oh, actually, that's not our website, the Connecting the Dots.
A few years ago, my daughter gave me Howard Zinn's book, A People's History of the United States, as a birthday gift. It changed
I don't know. Okay.
That's a comedy. I know.
Yes.
Monica, can you put the correct link in? I'm sorry about that.
No worries. Sorry about that. The background noise came from.
Oh, that was you? Okay, I thought it was me.
No, that was me. I'm sorry. Our actual portal is at the marylandlynchingmemorial.org site.
Yeah, it's connected there, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you go to our website and there's a tab that says county pages, if you click the button that says Anne Arundel, you'll be taken to their site.
And Jennifer, did you have another question? Okay, thank you. All right. Let's see. All right, Michelle just added another link into the chat for those who are interested.
Tell Lewis hi.
He heard your voice. And